Let's talk about having a licensure compact for counselors. This is in regards to the Interstate Compact for Portability for Counselors. And to discuss this with us today is Dr. Lynn Linde. She's the Chief Knowledge and Learning Officer at the American Counseling Association. She has over 35 years of experience as a school counselor, counseling supervisor at local and state levels, and counselor educator. She presents and writes in the area of ethical and legal issues, particularly for school counselors. And she was the 58th president of the American Counseling Association and has held a number of leadership and volunteer positions in the association and its entities. So, Lynn, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know counselors are really eager to get a licensure compact. So a lot of counselors throughout the country, they have clients or family members, or they're working with couples who are in states where the clinician's not licensed. So it really it has created ever since the conception of licensure, created an issue. So if you can share with us about the licensure compact, that would be very helpful. And to begin, if you could touch upon why is it needed, how it's going to be helpful. That would be great.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. I enjoy talking about the compact because I think it's one of the most important things that we're working on as a profession. Licensure is a state-by-state issue, and it took about 35 years for all the states and territories to achieve licensure. But everybody did it a little bit differently. And in order to practice, to see clients in a particular state, one has to be licensed in that state. That's not the reality of our lives. People move. Clients go home for the summer, or they go on sabbaticals, or they get deployed to someplace else. Counselors move. And so within this very mobile society that we have, and with all of the people who live in border states, along the border, who live in areas where people come in from other states, such as where I am in the DC area, it's very hard to ensure that you can always see all of the clients that you want to. So the compact is a way of providing a mechanism so that counselors can gain a privilege to practice in other states. So if the client moves, then the counselor can continue to work with that client legally, that other state would allow that counselor to be able to do that. And it provides greater access to services, particularly for clients in underserved areas, because that's a huge problem in this country. And we know that. So it's really about expanding the availability of services for clients and allowing counselors to continue to work with those clients with whom they've been working.
Excellent. And my understanding is the reason why this is the solution, right, for clinicians who are licensed in states to be able to practice over state lines is because, well, a couple alternatives would be like having a federal license, or just states simply not having licensure law and letting, say, a professional association regulate the practice. But my understanding is, on the federal level, the federal government was not given that privilege in the Constitution to do that. So that's why the states have that privilege. So it sounds like that wouldn't be a possibility. And then with doing away with licensure and having a professional association regulate the practice nationwide, sounds like that's also not going to happen for several reasons that states have for not, doing away with licensure law for behavioral health. Can you speak to those two alternatives and why the compact is the solution as of now?
Sure. There are actually a couple of other solutions as well, but you're absolutely right. I've learned a lot about federalism since I've been working on the compact. I mean, I knew that licensure is a state by state issue and that every state has done it a little bit differently. But I now recognize that's because the Constitution does give that responsibility to states, and that the federal government has no role in that. So you're absolutely correct. Universal licensure is not going to happen, or a federal licensure is not going to happen. There are some thoughts about a universal license, one license that every state would adopt. I think states are very vested in the time and energy that they have put into developing and regulating their licenses. And every state feels that they've done it better than anybody else, but they've all done a good job. They've really tried to ensure that the public is protected, and only people who are highly qualified are given a license and able to practice independently. So any effort to create a shared license or something that's going to work across states really has to have the buy-in of all of the states. Another model is reciprocity, which is, I agree to recognize your license. So anybody to whom you give a license, they can come practice in my state. Those kinds of gentle person's agreements are great as long as all of the people who make those decisions are still in place. The minute the players start leaving this and moving on, doing something else, they can fall apart. The compact is the legislative solution to portability, because every state that participates has to enact a bill that then becomes a law that allows them to join the compact, and therefore offer a privilege to practice to any other state that's in the compact. So it's a permanent solution. I mean, obviously it could be overdone if a state legislator chose to do that, but it is the most permanent solution, because once everybody enacts those laws, then the compact is created, the commission is created, and we can move forth with the compact and the privileges. And it is a mutual recognition. It does accept. Everyone says, I agree that you've done your due diligence in granting people in your state a license, and that you haven't granted a license to anyone who should not have a license. It also, by joining the compact, it does not impact how states license people for the first time in that state. So it doesn't have any impact on the licensure law for individual states. Colorado can continue to license counselors as it always has. There may be some differences for people they're granting privileges to through the compact.
Yeah, and I know, yeah, and some of the counseling associations have gotten together in the past, and they had a license portability effort, trying to get state licensing boards to agree upon some kind of base level requirements to allow people to apply for licensure in their states. Because like you're saying, every state has their own requirements and standards. So there was these portability efforts to make it easier for people to get licensed in other states if they were already licensed in another state. I mean, if you have someone who's been licensed for 40 years, they're not going to go back to school for these courses that are now required in this other state because they moved for retirement. So were those efforts helpful in setting some groundwork for the licensure compact, or not really?
I would say that those weren't taken into account really with the compact. The National Center for Interstate Compacts is a quasi-government agency, and ACA joined with them to create a counseling compact. And so ACA is basically paying for it, but NCIC is facilitating the process. So it's not an ACA compact, it is a states compact. Because we always knew that states weren't going to do anything that a professional association wants them to do, that they're going to do what's consistent with their licensing law and what's best for protecting the public in their state, which is why those other efforts from associations are only marginally successful as well. So NCIC has been responsible for a number of compacts for other occupations, such as nurses, OTPT, speech and language, And so they have an entire process. It's a very inclusive process. So the advisory group that looked at all of the state licensing laws. And one of the members of the advisory group had done some interesting research. And what we found is that there's actually about 65% agreement on major issues across licensure laws. Everyone thought that they were all over the place and there was never going to be a middle ground that we could come to. And what we found is there actually is. There are some variances with the number of supervised post-degree hours or specific coursework or things like that. But basically, everybody has the same general concepts for licensing. And so that made it much easier to move forward with the compact.
Yeah, and what's going to keep clinicians coming up the ranks from saying, if say we have 20 states that buy into the compact, that become members of the compact, to get licensed in the state where it's the easiest to get licensed and to maintain, and then that one state's getting a whole bunch of applicants. How
You
does
know,
that?
that's a great question, and uh, I've gotten that question from some of the licensing boards who've basically said, you know, the compact would allow people who don't meet the same level of qualifications as we have to come practice in our state. Well, yes and no. First of all, the compact is only for people who are licensed to practice independently at the highest level. So those are people who hold licenses from states that currently require 60 hours of coursework in specific areas, that require a licensing exam, that require post-degree supervision. So we're talking about people who are eminently qualified, people who can diagnose and treat behavioral conditions. Some would call it mental and emotional disorders. The laws are a little different around the language, but it's basically the ability to diagnose and treat clients, to develop treatment plans. So we're talking about folks who've been doing this. We aren't talking about people who are fresh out of graduate school working on post-degree hours for their full license. We aren't talking about people who have lesser credentials. So all of these folks are highly qualified and they are licensed at the highest level in their own state. So there isn't a lot of difference, a little bit, but not a lot. The other thing is they all come in with years of experience. If they have a clean record, there are no sanctions against their license, there are no problems with their license, they pass an FBI background check, then you're once again talking about strengthening the pool. The other thing is it's not like people are going to suddenly start flooding other states and come in. I know there's some concern with other compacts about you're going to be taking work away from the people who live here. Part of the compact is to allow people to continue to work with the clients with whom they already work. So if I'm working in a town where there's a college or university and part of my client, some of my clients are students and they go home for the summer, unless they go to a state that has allowed me to work with them over the summer, then I can't continue my work with them under the compact I could. So I'm not physically going to that state to start a new practice. I'm continuing to work with clients with whom I've already been working who are no longer located in the state that has my home license. So I know that there are some concerns, but part of it is we have to respect each other's jobs that we've done in developing licensure laws, in monitoring the profession and ensuring that counselors are meeting the standards, that they're doing the job that they should be doing, and that they have no complaints against them. And if we're doing that, then I think that some of those concerns will go away. Anything that's new is always hard to assuage all of the concerns.
Yeah, so this is one, you are mentioning some of the barriers, right? So people might think, well, you're infringing on my turf, on my market share. Therefore, I'm, going to kind of lobby that this doesn't go through, or I don't know if that's happening, or states might say, well, we've worked really hard to come up with our standards. This is the standards we want. But like you're saying, respecting the work that other state licensing boards have put into that process. But there is the fact that people can do telehealth, and therefore they can, with the compact, market their services in other states through telehealth for even, new clients, new market share. But to argue against that is really saying would really be saying that licensure is there to protect market share and not necessarily to protect the public, right? And that's one of the main justifications for licensure laws, to protect the public. So even though it makes sense for the clinician to say, hey, I want my market share, in a legal standpoint, in terms of the reasoning for licensure law, that would not hold water. What do you think about that?
And one of the reasons that legislators have been so willing to support the compact is because they see it as being regulated. They see it as a way of controlling. One of the questions they always ask is, and some of the boards ask, how do I know who's going to come into my state and be practicing? Whether the coming to my state is virtually or in person. And that, of course, is through the record keeping of the compact and the database, and the fact that anybody who's going to be granted a privilege has to go through that application process. So it really is about protecting the public. It's about expanding the availability of services. If we've seen nothing else during the pandemic, we have certainly seen the deficit in mental health delivery systems and the lack of practitioners with any credential to provide those services. Anecdotally, I hear so many stories from people who are saying, counselors who are saying, I can't take anybody else. I'm full. So many people have come to me because of problems that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. I can't take one more client. And clients, potential clients are saying, I can't find any openings. I can't find anybody who can work with me, who has an opening and will work with me. And so mental health services are still a growing field in this country. I know that people may feel that their market share might be impacted, but I think the reality is, when you look at the statistics, is that we don't have enough counselors or psychologists or social workers in this country to fill the need. And so it's really helping provide services to clients who wouldn't be able to access services otherwise.
Yes, I could see how the licensure compact protects clients, right? Because, like you said, the shortage. I mean, the government does an annual study on professional shortage areas for behavioral health professions, and almost the whole country is a professional shortage area for behavioral health, other than some small little areas. And then continuity of care and finding a clinician that's going to work for you. So many different reasons. So that's really helpful. Now, just to give us a base understanding, the compact's established. State licensing boards can become members of the compact.
They do become members.
Clinicians can apply to get registered with the compact. And then, if they are registered with the compact or get the compact, I don't know what you would call it, then they can be regulated. If there's ever a complaint or a sanction, they have to report it to the compact. So is that the basic framework there? Do I have that right?
In order for the commission to be triggered, for the compact to be triggered, 10 states have to enact the legislation. And once that happens, then a commission is established. And the commission consists of one member from each of the participating states. So the advisory group set the floor of 10. 10 states have to join. Some compacts, I think there's one compact that has 7, another that has 15, but NCIC generally recommends 10 as a good number. You want the group to be big enough to be meaningful, but you don't want to set the bar so high that it'll take 5 years to get that many states to join. So 10 is a reasonable number, and I'm not sure we're going to meet it in the 21 legislative session, but it looks fairly certain that we will for 22. So then one member of a licensing board from each of those states joins the commission, and then the commission writes the rules to decide how things are going to work. So within the language of the compact, there is no test that is named. Everyone has to pass a test, but that's not named. You don't want to put any specific information, such as a test name, in a piece of legislation, because should that ever change, then you have to go back and change all those laws. So it will be the role of the commission to name what tests are going to be acceptable, to figure out continuing education, to create a budget, to develop a database where all of this information about counselors is going to be housed, so that when a counselor wants to apply for a privilege, they enter their data into the database, and then they will be contacting the state where they want the privilege, and the state will then act on it. If they wanted to a privilege in multiple states that belong to the compact, their information is there. So they don't have to re-enter it all the time. Once their data is there, it's there. The advisory group and the drafting team define the home state for a counselor as the state where the counselor legally resides. And the reason that's important is for two reasons, really. One, in case there's any sanctions, states want to be able to find that person. And if their license is in a state where they don't live, that licensing board may not have accurate information. Plus, the lawyers said best practice is to use the legal residence. So the groups agreed that it should be the legal residence, but everything is tied to the home license, the home state license. So if I have a sanction against my home state license, every state where I have a privilege is informed, but only my home state can take action against me. The states where I hold a privilege cannot. If I have a sanction against me in a state where I hold a privilege, everybody is informed, and each of the states where I hold a privilege in my home state may or may not take action against me, depending on what the sanction is. If it's a sanction that is something that would be a sanction in one state, it might not be a sanction in another state. So that's why each of the states would have that latitude. But that's basically how the compact works. And we're hoping, of course, that all of the states and territories will join. That may not happen, which is why some of those other plans are floating around. The reciprocity plan, for example. I know that the group that developed that plan feels that that's a good segue with the compact, so that states that don't join the compact immediately might use reciprocity. But I think we're all hoping that down the road everybody will join the compact.
Yeah, that's definitely the easiest solution, I think, for everybody. And so, what has the progress been? So, how many states have decided to take part?
Well, that's a moving target.
Hmm.
Because when we started this, we said, well, we're going to target 10 or 15 states this year. There were 15 states represented on the advisory group, and many of those were states that we targeted. So states were targeted either because they came forward and said, we want to be part of this. We had two states where the lieutenant governors called NCIC and said, send us the compact. We want to push it through this year. There are other states where the professional association or the board came forth and said, we would like to do this. There are other states that have passed every occupational compact that has been created, and they're very compact friendly. They like compacts, and this is another compact. Some of the states are sort of putting the counseling compact in the same group with two other compacts, OTPT and speech and language. They're currently out there, and they want to pass them as a package. So it depends. So we've ended up with 20 states that are in various stages of working on this. In Maryland, for example, there has been a hearing in both the House and the Senate. There has been no opposition. All the testimony was in favor of this. But this was also a state where the governor's office, it's an administration bill, the governor's office wanted this. And so they are the ones that are really pushing this through. They are a compact friendly state. Who knew?
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Yeah, and we really want to help you with this. So what is it that, listeners can do to assist with the efforts of this? Should they write their licensing board, or what would be the most helpful thing in regards to this?
Um, Probably there are a couple of things. Well, let me finish with the 20 states. So we have bills in Georgia, Tennessee, and Nebraska as well. And additionally, we have a lot of support from the Department of Defense because of the work that counselors do with the military and their families, and because of military spouses moving so frequently every couple of years, and the difficulty that they have in changing license and getting a new license. So the Department of Defense has been extremely helpful in finding sponsors for bills and testifying, that kind of thing. So I would encourage anybody who wants to get involved to contact their professional association, to contact their licensing board, because the real work is the grassroots work. It's fine for NCIC and for ACA and for ASAB and the other associations to really be spearheading this, but the hard work comes at the state level, where people have to lobby legislators, they have to write testimony, they have to get everybody on board. I will tell you, today, so far, there has been no opposition to the counseling compact. That certainly wasn't true when all the licensure bills were going through. But we're in a different place now, and all of the mental health professions want compacts. So the opposition that we've historically had when we've tried to pass legislation is not there at the moment. I don't know if there's going to be any opposition. I mean, it could be that somebody will come out from somewhere and oppose it. That hasn't happened yet. But it's critically important for people to work on their legislators to get support for this.
Yeah, and does the compact receive federal money? Like I know that the government provides a lot of funding for compacts. Is this compact getting funding, say through HRSA or government funds?
The only funding that has gone into the compact so far is ACA funding. So our governing council did appropriate money from reserves to pay for the contract with NCIC. And so far, that has covered all of the costs. Once the commission is established, there will be some costs in the database. So at that point, we'll be looking for grants to help fund some of those costs.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of federal funding out there. There's not a huge amount.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I know HRSA has a lot of funding for the PsyPEC, right? For psychologists. Yeah. Well, thanks to ACA for funding this process so far. And I know it's been going on for 2 years, right?
Yes, we signed the contract. I mean, this is amazing to me. We signed the contract in January of 2019, and just a little over 2 years from then, we have bills in states all across the country. I mean, this is an issue that we have been talking about for probably my entire professional career. And I didn't think that I was going to be in the profession long enough to ever see this happen. And I just find it so exciting that we really are at this place where this is going to happen. Probably not this year, but within the next year or two, we're going to have a compact.
Yeah, and COVID-19, I'm sure, has assisted a lot with people's motivation to help push it through. So, Dr. Lynn
How
Linde,
ironic is that?
what's that?
I said, how ironic is that?
I know, right? Yes. Thank you so much for this. This has been very informative. Clarified a lot of questions that I'm sure a lot of people have. Help them become aware of these efforts, because these efforts go on without people even being aware of them. People working hard to make some extremely meaningful change for the profession. And I'm glad to hear of your optimism that this is going to happen. So as you listen to this, please take a few minutes, just simply write an email to your licensing board and your professional association letting them know of the importance of this and for them to take a look at it. That can certainly help. So thanks a lot, Lynn. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.